Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. 2 years following the release of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Activision would confirm that a sequel was in the works. Unsurprising, considering the original's critical and commercial success. Initially titled Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 Fusions, UA2 was released on nearly everything in September of 2009. Vicarious Visions handled development for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions. Meanwhile, N-Space was responsible for the Nintendo Wii, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo DS versions, with Savage Entertainment handling the porting of the PS2 version to the PlayStation Portable. For this video, we'll be examining 4 versions: 360, Wii, PSP, and DS in that order. The difference in scale of each system's power led to each version trying to offer similar gameplay, but with different executions. But are they all of comparable quality? Let's get straight into it. Choose your side, combine your powers, and let's turn the page to Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 for the Xbox 360. Following the defeat of Doctor Doom and his subsequent banishment to Asgard at the end of the first game, the country of Latveria is now governed by the newly elected Prime Minister, Lucia von Bardus. Nick Fury suspects that von Bardus is preparing an attack against the United States. He leads a strike team consisting of Spider-Man, Wolverine, Captain America, and Iron Man to infiltrate Latveria and confront von Bardus. Unbeknownst to the heroes, this attack is carried out entirely without the US government's knowledge, as Fury was unable to secure their approval for the operation and decided to take matters into his own hands. A year after von Bardus was defeated and presumed dead, she conducts a full-scale attack on New York City in retaliation. Although von Bardus is defeated, the destruction caused by her invasion, along with the attack being the responsibility of Fury and the hero's unlawful actions, leads the US government to consider implementing the Superhero Registration Act. This act would compel heroes to reveal their identities and act only on the government's orders, or else be labeled as wanted criminals. 3 days later, the New Warriors, a team of teenage superheroes, are filming an episode of their TV show. While it looks like the New Warriors have the advantage, one of the villains, Nitro, blows himself up, causing a massive explosion that kills the young heroes and 612 civilians, 60 of which were schoolchildren. Yeah, really dark stuff for a Marvel game. This was the final blow, and the SRA is fully enacted. Iron Man, persuaded by the SRA, leads the pro-registration side of the superhero community. Meanwhile, Captain America remains opposed to the act, and leads an underground resistance of anti-registration heroes. From here, the player can choose which side to join, leading them down one of 2 paths. The story is interesting because, while being a direct sequel to the first game, which had an entirely original plot, UA2 is a partial adaptation of the comics. It starts as an adaptation of the Secret War story arc, before leading into the events of the controversial Civil War, with the third and final part of the story being completely original. Surprisingly, it's uncommon for Marvel video games to closely adapt storylines from the comics, and the game's faithfulness is both a strength and a weakness, for reasons we'll discuss later. Overall, I find UA2's story to be stronger than UA1's. It reduces some of the more extreme aspects of the Civil War comics, and instead of just jumping from villain to villain, UA2's narrative is much more focused. It's fascinating to see each hero's ideology clash over the Registration Act. It does lose momentum in the third act, where the story becomes more basic and less engaging, but the first 2/3 of the game's story are especially compelling. Just like before, UA2 is an isometric beat-em-up game, where the player chooses a team of 4 heroes to fight waves of enemies, solve basic puzzles, and face bosses. It includes minor RPG mechanics, such as leveling up, upgrading character-specific moves and abilities, and applying boosts to your team. The most notable new feature in combat is the fusion attacks. When the meter in the bottom right is fully charged, the player can select 2 heroes to perform a fusion, like Iron Man reflecting his repulsor's off-cap shield to cover a wide area, or Spider-Man webbing enemies into a tight group for a partner to wipe out all at once. Although there is some overlap, fusion attacks offer a lot of variety depending on the combination of heroes, and they're a lot of fun to see and use. Additionally, there are different types of fusions, such as those that focus on clearing large groups of enemies, and others that target smaller areas for devastating damage, making them ideal for bosses. This adds a layer of strategy by encouraging you to choose the best type of fusion for each fight, and ensuring your team can execute each type of fusion attack. Outside of combat, UA2 added dialogue options similar to Mass Effect, allowing you to choose whether to be aggressive, diplomatic, or defensive when responding to another character. However, these options are mostly pointless. Aside from changing a single line of dialogue, the character's response remains the same. These choices have no real impact. They don't unlock side missions, secrets, or alternate paths, making them feel tacked on because they were a popular feature in games at the time. In terms of mechanics, UA2's combat is as engaging as its predecessor, with the addition of fusions making it even better. It's straightforward, button-mashy fun that doesn't have much depth, but is compensated by the large variety of characters and powers available, allowing you to switch up your team at almost any time when your current heroes start to feel stale. The base roster includes 23 playable heroes. It mainly features city-based heroes from the Civil War comics, and a lot of X-Men, leaving out more magic and space-focused heroes like Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange. This results in a weaker, less diverse roster than the first game, which covered a broader part of the Marvel Universe. This lack of variety extends to the locations. Ultimate Alliance 1 took you all across the Marvel Universe, such as Mephisto's realm, Asgard, and Murder World, making each location feel fresh and exciting. However, once again, due to being limited by adapting Civil War, Ultimate Alliance 2 mostly takes place in parts of New York. The locations are much more generic and lack the magic that made Ultimate Alliance 1 so special. Frankly, I was visually bored by the third stage in the game, and that feeling persisted as I went further. Now, I don't want to make it seem like staying true to the Civil War storyline is only a disadvantage for the game. Despite its issues, there's something special that makes UA2 stand out from any other Marvel game. I've mentioned in previous Marvel videos that I love when the game features obscure or underappreciated characters, and this game delivers that in spades. Many heroes from all levels of popularity appear as cameos and in boss fights throughout the adventure, like Justice, Goliath, and there's a boss fight against Prodigy.
Well, look who's here, the real heroes. You know, like I used to be, until I refused to sign a piece of paper. I mean, look at you. Do you even see yourselves? You're standing there with Venom, and you still think you're the good guys?
Prodigy. Do you guys remember Prodigy? You, comment below your favorite Prodigy comic right now. No cheating. These less appreciated characters also appear in the playable roster. This version of Venom is Mac Gargan, who was originally the Scorpion, instead of Eddie Brock, because Mac was Venom at the time. I know everyone much prefers Brock, and so do I, but it's nice to see a different incarnation of the character get some time in the spotlight. I grew to appreciate Gargan's sarcasm and his humorously dark take on Venom.
No effect, Mr. Stark! The villains are completely out of control!
You don't say.
Songbird is a pro-registration route exclusive character, and although she's had a few more appearances than others, she's still not one of Marvel's most recognizable. She was actually the reason I chose the pro-registration route on my playthrough. Let's be honest, Cap is objectively correct, but getting to play as Songbird is such a rare opportunity that I had to take it. So yes, I sacrificed my morality for a woman. Story of our lives, am I right, fellas? Perhaps the biggest appeal of UA2's roster for me was the inclusion of Penance, aka Robbie Baldwin. Robbie was originally the superhero Speedball, one of the new warriors present during the Stanford explosion. After miraculously surviving Nitro's attack, his powers were altered to only be activated by pain. The survivor's guilt and absolute train of misery the comics force Robbie through psychologically breaks him. Robbie commissions a suit with 612 interior spikes, one for each Stanford victim, that constantly impale his skin to activate his powers and ensure he remains in agony for his actions. It was a really dark and depressing direction to take what was a fairly lighthearted hero. Robbie has since recovered, and reclaimed the identity of Speedball, leaving his time as Penance very short-lived. It's unlikely that Speedball will ever return to the Penance persona, and I think that's what makes his inclusion so cool to me. He's a character that could have only been made playable at this particular time frame, with a game surrounding this particular storyline, and I can say with certainty that Penance will never reappear in any future Marvel game. Except perhaps in a mobile game, but even that seems unlikely. It's an inclusion like this that helps make Ultimate Alliance 2's roster stand apart from the crowd. Speaking of the connection with the comics, the stronger connection means there are more references to the hero's past events and development from the books.
How generous of you. You'll make it just and fair. What, Shield Commander? President?
You must be kidding. You think that's what this is all about?
Ah, wait, that's right. They don't elect drunks to the White House.
Don't go there.
More recent Marvel games tend to omit such nods in favor of a broader, more sanitized portrayal of each character. It makes me wish we had more comic story arcs adapted into video games. Witnessing major storylines unfold through cutscenes is a rare treat, and it could give lesser-known characters a chance to shine. It's wishful thinking, I know, but hey, a man can dream. Ultimate Alliance 2 has plenty of replay value. Naturally, having multiple routes thanks to the two factions provides a strong incentive to replay the game twice to get the whole experience.
You have no idea what you've just done.
Par for the course, crazy lady! Besides, I can always go the other way on my next playthrough.
There are many secrets hidden throughout each level, which can unlock concept art, dossiers on the Marvel Universe, and extra playable characters. Each character also has an unlockable costume for completing specific challenges, though it's very disappointing that the costumes per character were reduced from 3 to just 1. I encountered quite a few bugs during my playthrough. Some were simple visual glitches, like Big Iceman, while others caused me to fall through the floor or broke the game's pathing, making it impossible to progress and forcing me to reload a previous save. Credit to the game, it has a very generous autosave system, so I didn't have to go back too far after each glitch, but it still feels frustrating to have to repeat progress. The final topic to cover is the downloadable content. Ultimate Alliance 2 offered 6 DLC characters after launch: Cable, Black Panther, Magneto, Psylocke, Juggernaut, and Carnage. These characters were only available to purchase for a limited time before being removed, and since this game never got a gold edition with all the DLC on disc like the previous installment, they are no longer available. In 2016, remastered versions of both Ultimate Alliance games were released for purchase digitally, which included all DLC, giving players another opportunity. However, these remasters have since been removed from sale. Whether another re-release with all the DLC will happen in the future remains uncertain, but for now, a significant portion of 2's roster has been lost to the void. If you didn't own an HD console, but still wanted a piece of the Ultimate Alliance 2 pie, standard definition versions of the game were released on PS2 and Wii. Naturally, these versions don't have the upgraded visuals of the HD version, but even weaker hardware like the Wii is capable of much better than what we have, the biggest sin being the character models, which lack separate fingers and feature blank, unemotional faces. Additionally, these versions reuse a significant number of assets from the first game, including models, UI elements, and animations. It can make the experience feel like playing Ultimate Alliance 1.5, rather than a true sequel. The gameplay, thankfully, stay similar in quality to the HD versions, although the Wii version sometimes requires motion controls for QuickTime events and the occasional minigame. The only real flaw in this version is how it handles fusion attacks. When activated, you have to select your partner using the Wii remote. I usually keep my arm at my side, but it often takes several seconds for the sensor to detect the remote, and the fusion activation sometimes times out before I can select my partner. There are also times where I swear I pressed the button and did everything correctly, but the fusion simply wouldn't activate. This all made the system feel much less responsive than the HD version, and I was less motivated to use it because of how unreliable it was. The SD versions still support couch co-op, but lacked online play, which was fairly common. These versions have fewer main missions, but they try to compensate by making a significant part of the roster unlockable through bonus missions, instead of progressing through the story. This was a mistake. First, it diminishes the appeal of the choose your side aspect of the story, as there are only 2 exclusive missions per team, which reduces replay value. Second, most character missions aren't available until partway through the final act, limiting team variety for most of the game. Lastly, the bonus missions themselves aren't very good. Many require playing as a single character, which conflicts with the game's team-focused mechanics. This was the wrong approach. Characters should have been unlocked by playing through the story. As a gripe that may not bother other people, but bothers me, are the changes made to some stages that don't take the story into account. For example, when Nick Fury is disarming the bombs at the refinery, it shows that the Green Goblin was the one responsible for preventing Fury from disarming the final bomb. In the next scene, where Fury explains what happens, and the game reuses the CG cutscene from the HD version, it's clearly Venom who stops him, even though he wasn't present at all during the battle. Then, later, when a memorial is held for a bunch of heroes who were presumed dead following the Negative Zone escape, we see Black Widow's portrait, counting her among the dead. But the next time we get to control our characters, guess who's just hanging around the base? It feels sloppy, and is the kind of lack of detail that can make the SD versions feel tacked on, rather than proper, full experiences. The SD version's roster is nearly the same, but it has some differences. Iron Fist is not playable, Psylocke is part of the base roster, and Blade and Cyclops are exclusive characters. So if this was the only version you could buy, you're getting almost the same roster, -1. However, there are no alternate costumes to unlock, so this game is basically unplayable. Okay, joking aside. All things considered, if you're looking for a Marvel beat-em-up on the Wii and PS2, these versions aren't bad and work perfectly fine. The motion controls definitely hurt the Wii version because of their impact on fusion moves, and there were several cut corners, including fewer story missions and subpar presentation. It's ultimately just a lesser experience than the HD versions. It gets the job done, but isn't anything more than that. And it's hardly the definitive Ultimate Alliance 2 experience. And it only gets worse from here as we reach the PSP version. It seems promising at first, since it's a straight port of the SD version, with all content on the Wii and PS2 remaining intact. While the SD version was underwhelming as a console experience, it could have been great on a handheld system. Unfortunately, this was either too ambitious, or Savage Entertainment did a poor job optimizing it for the system, because what we got is rough. The game's frame rate is unstable and choppy, and as you progress further and more enemies appear on screen, the game struggles to hold itself together. To make matters worse, the game crashes very often, especially on loading screens. And I'm talking about serious crashes that force my PlayStation Portable to shut itself down. I tried dozens of times to start several of the bonus missions, and they failed every single time, making them unplayable. As you may recall, close to half the roster is locked behind these bonus missions, meaning several characters remain inaccessible to me. When the game worked, it was enjoyable, a solid beat-em-up to take on the go. But when it wasn't functioning at 100%, which it very often wasn't, playing was frustrating, awkward, and honestly just felt terrible. Pepper in the game's subpar visuals and long loading screens, and what you get is a slapdash port forced onto the PSP, held together only by hopes and dreams. At least the game has ad hoc multiplayer, so if by all odds you have 3 other friends with a PSP and a copy of the game, then you could suffer through as a team. Regardless, unless you have a high tolerance for technical failures, I strongly recommend you stay away from this version. It is hands down the worst way to experience Ultimate Alliance 2. If you only had a Nintendo DS, getting a straight port of the Wii and PS2 versions wasn't in the cards. Unfortunately, it just isn't as powerful of a system as the PSP. So for Ultimate Alliance 2 to make it to the dual screen system, it would need to be built from the ground up, and that's exactly what happened. UA2 DS may be the visually weakest of the 4 versions, but with fully 3D characters and environments, it looks fantastic for the system. The level structure is based on the SD versions, and having just played it, each stage is closely recreated, a remarkable accomplishment. An odd aspect of the presentation is that the soundtrack consists entirely of recycled music from Ultimate Alliance 1, rather than 2. They're still good tracks, but it was a strange choice. The roster has taken a bit of a hit, with only 15 playable characters instead of the usual 23. This is slightly made up for with the inclusion of 2 exclusive playable characters, She-Hulk and Sentry. She-Hulk is always a fun addition, and Sentry was a welcome surprise, as this would be his video game debut. The gameplay translates well. Light and heavy attacks are executed via the face buttons, and special moves are activated using the touchscreen. Impressively, the game manages to have all 4 heroes visible on screen at once, though this can be a bit of a weakness. To have all 4 heroes without destroying the frame rate, fewer enemies appear at a time. To offset your team's numerical advantage, some enemies deal enormous damage to compensate, making your heroes feel very squishy. That's not the impression you want to have when playing as the likes of Hulk or Miss Marvel. To be clear, the increased damage doesn't make the game too hard. I find it quite balanced. I just think the game would have been better with only 1 or 2 heroes active at a time, allowing you to swap between others easily. This would enable more enemies on screen that deal normal damage, making your heroes feel stronger and better showcasing their powers. Movement and combat did feel a little slow, not to the point where I think it significantly harms the game, but it does make the gameplay seem somewhat sluggish. That said, I am actively comparing it to the other versions I recently played, and it may not be as noticeable to someone whose only experience is with the DS version. Additionally, there was some slowdown during the final few levels, when they tried to get more ambitious with the environments and enemies. Otherwise, you can run, fly, and blast just as well as you could in the console versions. However, the one major weakness DS has compared to its contemporaries is its lack of replay value. It only has 2 exclusive missions per side, like the SD versions, but it entirely lacks any New Game Plus feature. There is no way to carry over your levels, and you will need to unlock the characters all over again each playthrough. The worst example of this is the likes of Venom and Green Goblin, who are only unlocked at the second to last level. This leaves them accessible for only about 1 hour, with no New Game Plus available to keep them playable at the start of your next playthrough. The game is also devoid of any collectibles. There's really no major incentive to replay the game again after your first playthrough. This will likely be a one and done, unless you're desperate to see the minute differences between Cap and Iron Man's sides. UA2 DS has the least amount of content and slow gameplay, but it still functions fine, which is more than I can say for the PSP version. If you only had a DS and were desperate to get a piece of the Ultimate Alliance 2 action, what's here is serviceable. The fact that the game was translated to the DS this well to begin with is commendable, and I'd be lying if I said I still wasn't enjoying myself despite its shortcomings. But if you've already played any of the console versions, there's nothing here worth double dipping for, unless you're a massive fan of She-Hulk or Sentry. Ultimate Alliance 2 delivers on bringing together all your favorite heroes for a fun, button-mashing good time. Although I think it's not as good as the original, there are many things 2 gets right, with features and inclusions that make it stand out from other Marvel games. The SD versions and handheld ports are weaker by a good margin, but as long as you avoid the PSP version, any of them will provide an enjoyable beat-em-up with some classic Marvel superheroes. It will come as little surprise to see that the PSP version of Ultimate Alliance 2 will rank the lowest, making it no further than the 71st spot. The DS version will move up to number 59, replacing Mortal Kombat. Only a small way higher is the Wii version at 52. Finally, the highest of all 4 versions is, of course, the HD versions, which will reach number 21, surpassing Fate Extra. If I'm craving Ultimate Alliance 2, this is the one I'll pick up every time. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and sharing it with your friends. How do you feel about Marvel games adapting comic storylines? Would you prefer more faithful adaptations, or do you think Marvel games are better off having original plots instead? If you could see a storyline adapted, which one would you choose? I think an adaptation of the 2015 Secret Wars event could be really exciting, since the different sections of Doom's battle world could provide amazing stage variety, as the heroes travel from world to world and defeat each Baron. Also, while we're dreaming, a video game of the King in Black story would be rad as hell. Null deserves a chance to be in a game. Anyway, share your thoughts down in the comments. Let's talk comics. Remember to stick to the end of the video to see which game our wheel will select next. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.